What drives a nation to risk everything for lasting glory? In 1845, Britain sent two of its most advanced ships into the Arctic with 129 men. They vanished, no signals, no return. For over 150 years, their fate remained buried in ice. But as evidence surfaced, it revealed more than a disappearance. It exposed a turning point in exploration. This is the story of the Franklin expedition, where bold ambition met a brutal frontier. So how far would you go when the mission is bold? The stakes are historic, and every decision could define your legacy. Let's dive into it. By the mid-19th century, the world was racing forward. Steam-powered machines, iron ships defied the wind, and once blank maps were filling with certainty. The Age of Enlightenment had convinced nations that science, reason, and empire could solve any mystery, if pursued with enough will. At the forefront stood the British Empire, already ruling over 1/4 of the world's population. Now, its ambition turned north. The Northwest Passage was a long-sought sea route, rumored to thread through Arctic Canada, linking the Atlantic and Pacific. If found, it would shorten global trade routes by several months and secure international dominance. But beyond economics, it offered something greater: glory. Britain wasn't alone. Spain, France, Russia, and the United States had all attempted Arctic exploration. But by the year 1845, the British Admiralty wanted more than scattered reports. They wanted control. "This is the last great prize," wrote Sir John Barrow, second Secretary of the Admiralty. To Britain, the Arctic wasn't just a strategic frontier, it was the final stage on which to immortalize its explorers. For men in uniform, the promise was irresistible. As a young officer in 1845, he faced a stark choice: remain ordinary or brave the Arctic and risk everything for honor, rank, and history. The reward? Eternal recognition. The cost? Possibly his life. And many paid for it. During the 19th century, Britain launched more than 40 Arctic expeditions. Hundreds of men vanished or passed away. According to the United Kingdom Hydrographic Office, fewer than half of these missions achieved any meaningful progress. Most were broken by scurvy, frostbite, starvation, or the relentless crush of ice. And yet they kept going. Why? Because the Arctic was more than a mystery, it was a mirror. In its icy surface, explorers saw ambition and the desire to be remembered as the last name on the map. Reason gave way to obsession. The ice called, and they answered. But before the ice claimed them, the Admiralty had to make a decision that would define everything that followed. By the spring of 1845, the British Admiralty was ready to launch its most ambitious Arctic expedition yet. But one question loomed: who would lead it? Their top choices, veteran explorers like Sir William Parry and Sir James Clark Ross, declined. Years in polar conditions had worn them down, and families urged them not to return. Even Captain Francis Crozier, among Britain's most capable Arctic navigators, was passed over. Not for lack of skill, but because he was Irish and considered socially inferior. Eventually, the Admiralty turned to Sir John Franklin. To many, Franklin was a respected naval officer, honorable, disciplined, and kind. Yet he was also remembered by some as the man who ate his boots, a reference to his 1819 overland Arctic expedition, during which extreme starvation forced the team to boil leather for survival. Over the years, hushed rumors circulated about even darker measures, which Franklin firmly denied. Still, the shadow of that journey lingered. Despite the past, Franklin had qualities others lacked. At 59, he was older than most polar commanders, but he had real Arctic experience, personal humility, and a powerful need to redeem his legacy. In a final letter before departure, Franklin wrote, "I am determined to fulfill this great national enterprise. Not for glory, but for the duty I owe to the Crown, and to those who trust me with their lives." He wasn't the Admiralty's first pick. He was the fifth. But he looked the part, knighted, loyal, and symbolically perfect for a headline-grabbing mission. On the 19th of May, 1845, Franklin stepped aboard Her Majesty's ship Erebus as commander. Alongside him were two key officers, Francis Crozier, the overlooked expert, and James Fitzjames, a rising star, brave, charismatic, but unproven in polar conditions. Together, they led 129 men into the Arctic. Franklin's experience brought confidence, but also a tendency to press forward when restraint was wiser. As historian Andrew Lambert noted in his 2023 book Polar Empire, Franklin's relentless optimism could border on recklessness, especially in extreme conditions. So the Admiralty got their story. Franklin got his chance at redemption, and 129 men followed him into the ice. But did they follow the right man? But even the strongest men need stronger ships, and the ones built for this mission were unlike anything the Arctic had ever seen. Long before they faced the Arctic, both Her Majesty's ship Erebus and Her Majesty's ship Terror had seen combat. The Terror was built in the year 1813 during the War of 1812, designed to launch massive mortars during siege warfare. The Erebus followed in 1826. Both were bomb vessels, compact, heavily reinforced, and engineered to withstand violent recoil. Ironically, those same qualities made them ideal for ramming through ice. To prepare them for the expedition, their wooden hulls were lined with iron sheeting. The bows were doubled in thickness and reinforced with solid timber, built to punch through frozen seas. But the upgrades went far beyond brute strength. Each ship was outfitted with a steam engine, salvaged from British locomotives once used on the London and Greenwich Railway. These iron giants powered a single brass propeller, allowing the ships to maneuver even when the wind abandoned them. At a time when sail reigned supreme, this hybrid design was cutting edge. For protection, the rudder and propeller could be drawn back into the hull, shielding them from being shattered by pack ice. This was one of the first recorded uses of such retractable features in naval history. According to the United Kingdom's National Maritime Museum in their 2023 report, the Erebus and Terror were among the most advanced Arctic vessels of their day, more fortress than ship. Inside, the innovation continued. Each vessel had a desalination system that could convert seawater into drinkable water, critical for long voyages. They carried a daguerreotype camera, one of the earliest of its kind, capable of capturing images in the Arctic's blinding light. And remarkably, they had a custom-built diving suit, crafted in 1845, for clearing ice beneath the hull. These were not ordinary ships. They were, in every sense, 19th-century spacecraft, designed to endure an environment so hostile, so distant from the known world, that no chart could fully prepare them. And yet, for all their strength, they would disappear. But even the most advanced ships ever sent into the ice couldn't prepare their crew for what waited just beyond Greenland. Before we continue, I have a special 10-second request for all of you listening. If you can help me in any way, just press the notification bell and hit that subscribe button. It means the world. It really supports this channel. And if you do that for me, I promise my team and I will do everything we can to make this show even better for you. Deal? By late July of 1845, Her Majesty's ships Erebus and Terror had reached their final resupply point, the west coast of Greenland. Yet the atmosphere on board was far from somber. Laughter echoed across the decks. Men played games, swapped stories, and sang songs. Some even took to the stage, donning theater costumes brought along to entertain the crew, small efforts to keep spirits high in the face of the unknown. Each vessel carried not only vital supplies, but pieces of home. A cat prowled the lower decks. A dog named Neptune stood watch. And aboard one of the ships rode Jacko, a small monkey gifted by Lady Jane Franklin herself. Alongside them came more than 12,000 books, cricket bats, musical instruments, and nearly 16,000 sealed tin rations, making this one of the first Arctic expeditions to depend heavily on preserved food. These were not the trappings of mere survival. They were choices made for morale, comfort, and the preservation of humanity at the edge of the world. At this final stop, 5 men, too ill from the Atlantic crossing, were discharged and sent home. They would become the expedition's only survivors. The remaining 124 stayed behind, unaware that they had just shared their last moments of peace, warmth, and contact with civilization. Then, on the 12th of July, the Erebus and the Terror turned their bows northward, sailing into Baffin Bay. They waved farewell to the last 2 vessels traveling alongside them, whalers who would later report seeing the ships slip into Lancaster Sound, a vast ice-lined gateway deep into the Canadian Arctic. That wave, that quiet gesture from the deck, would be the final time anyone ever saw them alive. From that point forward, silence. No letters. No signals. No survivors. The Arctic closed behind them, taking its secrets with it. And back home, as summer turned to fall, and fall into winter, hope gave way to silence. And the mystery began. If you could send one last letter before stepping into the unknown, what would you say? Who would you write to, and what would you leave unsaid? Let us know in the comments below. As the Erebus and the Terror sailed into Lancaster Sound, they crossed into the unforgiving Canadian Arctic archipelago, a place where ice moves like a tide, then strikes like stone. The Franklin expedition had entered a region where even a minor error could mean 124 lives lost to snow and silence. Massive sheets of ice drifted for hundreds of miles, piling into jagged walls taller than a man. Winds howled over narrow leads, temporary openings in the ice that sealed shut within hours. According to the Canadian Ice Service's 2024 report, multi-year ice now covers less than 5% of what it did in 1845, revealing just how extreme conditions were for Franklin and his men. Despite their technological edge, the ships were slow. The steam engines, repurposed from railway locomotives, could only push them at 4 knots, barely faster than a rowboat. Worse still, they carried just 12 days of coal, showing the engines were more symbolic than strategic. Eventually, both ships became trapped near Beechey Island, where sea ice can linger for months. The crew insulated the hulls with snow, covered the decks with canvas, and rationed food. Then came the polar night, weeks, sometimes months, without sunlight. Temperatures dropped to -40 degrees Celsius, enough to freeze breath and crack timber. Frost crept into every seam. Even sound seemed to vanish. The world outside had frozen, and the men inside waited. But while the ice was closing in from the outside, something far more lethal was already at work inside their bodies. The Franklin expedition set out with nearly 16,000 tin cans of preserved food, state-of-the-art at the time, and intended to sustain the entire crew for years. But what was meant as a breakthrough in provisioning would soon become a silent killer. The Admiralty had rushed the procurement. Contracts went to the lowest bidder, a man who was given only a few weeks to seal thousands of cans. Under pressure, the work was sloppy. Lead solder ran down the inside walls like melted wax. Some cans weren't sealed properly. Others were undercooked, allowing bacteria to survive. Decades later, a 2023 study from the Canadian Conservation Institute analyzed recovered tins from Beechey Island. The findings were grim: dangerously high levels of lead, spoiled meat, mold, and even traces of Clostridium botulinum, the bacterium responsible for botulism, a disease that can cause paralysis. In the winter of 1984, a forensic team unearthed the bodies of 3 sailors buried on Beechey Island. Their remains, preserved by permafrost, told a clearer story. Lead levels in their tissues were up to 10 times higher than what is considered safe. The danger didn't stop there. The ship's desalination systems, used to make seawater drinkable, were lined with lead piping. Paired with a diet severely lacking in zinc, the crew's bodies were unable to regulate metal absorption. Without zinc, the body cannot flush out toxins effectively. So the lead built up in their bones, their blood, and eventually their brains. In the end, the ice was merciless, but long before it closed in, the real threat was already inside. Their next meal may have been the most lethal thing on board. By the early months of 1847, 3 crew members from the Franklin expedition lay buried on Beechey Island. Their graves, marked with simple wooden boards, stood in silence against the Arctic wind. The official cause of death was recorded as pneumonia. But later investigations told a more disturbing story. Post-mortem examinations, including a 2023 study by the Franklin Expedition forensics team at the University of Alberta, uncovered overwhelming evidence of severe lead poisoning, advanced malnutrition, and the early onset of scurvy. At the time, scurvy was still not fully understood. While the Royal Navy traditionally used lemon juice to prevent it, the Franklin expedition carried canned fruits instead. Yet poor sealing and exposure to time had degraded the vitamin C. The men thought they had protection. In truth, the cure had vanished before it was needed. While Franklin and his men endured a second brutal Arctic winter, life continued in London. But for Lady Jane Franklin, each silent day was unbearable. She waited. She hoped. But by early 1847, the absence of any message made the truth harder to deny. Still, the Admiralty held back. They had anticipated the expedition might winter over once, perhaps twice. Delays were expected. But this silence was something else. Lady Franklin refused to stay quiet. She began a relentless campaign, writing to politicians, publishing open letters, appealing to clergy, naval officers, and scientific societies. Then she reached out to one of the most influential voices in the English-speaking world, Charles Dickens. At first, Dickens echoed the Admiralty's position that the Arctic was dangerous, but not beyond Franklin's reach. But Lady Franklin shared her husband's notes, his loyalty, his discipline, his sense of duty. And she left Dickens with one line: "If you believe in heroes, then write for one now." And he did. Through essays, letters, and serialized articles, Dickens moved the public. He framed Franklin not as lost, but as a national symbol of resolve, the last of the great explorers. By the final months of 1847, pressure in Parliament had begun to build. Newspapers across the empire demanded action. Petitions flooded Westminster. In early 1848, the first official rescue expeditions were launched, some by sea, others overland. One was led by James Clark Ross, the very man who had turned down the original command. Britain was finally looking north, but the ice had already closed its grip, and they were too late. On the 22nd of April 1848, 105 survivors left Her Majesty's ships Erebus and Terror, now locked in ice near King William Island. Their goal reached Back's Fish River, nearly 400 kilometers away, by crossing broken sea ice, gravel plains, and treeless tundra without shelter. Each group dragged a naval whaleboat mounted on wooden sledges. Weighing nearly 8,000 pounds and packed with food, tents, firearms, and tools, each boat took enormous effort to move, even a few meters. Years later, a British search team described one of the abandoned camps. They found the remains of more than 20 men, some in sleeping positions, others collapsed beside the sled. There were bones, broken boots, and no signs of a fire. By that point, the crew had been trapped for nearly 3 years. Supplies were spoiled or contaminated with lead. Many were too weak to walk. Some turned back to the ships. Others collapsed where they stood. According to Inuit oral testimony recorded by Parks Canada in 2022, 4 white men were seen near Chantry Inlet. 3 could barely move. 1 was strong. Modern forensics confirmed it. At the time, admitting such a possibility was unthinkable, but this was survival in its rawest form. Men trained for order, for discipline, had been pushed past every limit. And yet, even then, they tried to hold the line. They carried their dead. They kept moving. They still believed someone might find them. If you were one of the last 105, would you have left the safety of the ships or stayed behind and taken your chances with the ice? Let us know in the comments below. We want to hear how you would have faced the impossible. And don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel to discover more interesting things. For more than 150 years, the fate of Franklin's men was buried beneath rumors, bones, and silence. Yet remarkably, the clues were never far. Inuit communities had pointed to the wreck's locations for generations, but their knowledge was dismissed. A single note discovered at Victory Point revealed that Sir John Franklin had died on the 11th of June, 1847. By the time the ships were abandoned, 24 men, officers and sailors, had already died. The survivors attempted a brutal march toward the Canadian mainland, but after that passed away. Then, in the year 2014, everything changed. A Parks Canada expedition located the wreck of Her Majesty's ship Erebus in the eastern region of Queen Maud Gulf. 2 years later, in 2016, Her Majesty's ship Terror was discovered south of King William Island, in what is now called Terror Bay. Since then, archaeological work has accelerated, especially around Erebus, which lies in shallow water and faces increasing risk from climate shifts and storm damage. The wreck has yielded remarkable finds: pistols, sealed medicine bottles, navigation tools, and seamen's chests, personal artifacts that offer glimpses into the daily lives of the crew. Researchers believe that beneath the decks, answers still wait. Journals, letters never delivered, items that may reveal the order of deaths, the final routes taken, and who may have survived longer than anyone assumed. In 2023, Parks Canada confirmed the recovery of sealed compartments aboard the Terror, sections that have remained airtight since 1848. These may still protect paper documents and photographic plates, untouched by time or seawater. And the world is still watching. On the 3rd of February, 2025, the History Channel aired an episode titled The Franklin Expedition as part of its History's Greatest Mysteries series. It examined not only the expedition's collapse but also the enduring search to uncover what truly happened. The Franklin story remains more than a mystery. It is a monument to ambition, to courage, and to the staggering cost of reaching too far into the unknown. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Click on the video that appears on your screen right now. I hope you'll love this content. Comment below about the next topic you'd like to see featured on our channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for being with us. Leave a comment, like to show your support, and remember to hit that subscribe button for more exciting videos. See you next time.